The police called Lily a runaway and closed the case, but I knew she would never leave her favourite bear behind. The Millers next door brought me meals and sat with me, their kindness feeling like a heavy blanket. "We're here for you, Martha," Sarah Miller said, patting my hand, but her touch felt cold. I smiled and thanked her, locking away my doubts. Yesterday, returning their pie dish, I spotted a pink ribbon in their garage, Lily's, with the tiny stars she adored. She had it on the day she vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs. These people who consoled me daily might have answers. I needed to learn the truth without alerting them. So I started watching from my kitchen window, noting their routines. That evening, I heard raised voices through their screen door. John Miller growled, "She's poking around. We need to settle this before she finds something." Sarah whispered back, "The circle is sealed. She has nothing." Circle? What circle? I crept back inside, my hands shaking. They weren't just neighbours. They were hiding something vile. I poured a glass of water, my mind racing. Then I remembered the old lockbox where I keep important papers. Maybe there was something there I could use. But if they saw me looking, I pushed the fear down. For Lily, I would become a shadow they never noticed. I smiled softly, etching their words into memory. Tonight, I would begin my watch in earnest. I spent the morning sorting through Lily's room, pretending to tidy, but really searching for anything the police missed. Her diary was gone, the one with the floral cover she wrote in every night. The Millers dropped by with muffins, and Sarah insisted on helping. "Let me take your mind off things, Martha," she said, her eyes scanning the room too intently. I let her stay, my skin crawling. After she left, I checked the window latch Lily always complained about. It was loose, and I found a smudge of dirt on the sill. Not from Lily. She was careful. My gut twisted. I needed to get into the Miller's house, but how? Their spare key was under the frog statue by the door. I remembered from when they went on vacation last year. If I could slip in during their evening walk. But if caught, I'd lose any chance at justice. I was risking my safety, but Lily's face kept me steady. That afternoon, I saw them loading boxes into their car, labelled for donation. Something felt off. When they drove away, I hurried over and peeked inside one box. It was full of old clothes, but tucked beneath was a small, leather-bound book, Lily's diary. My breath hitched. I snatched it and rushed home, my heart pounding. Flipping through the pages, I found entries about the Millers inviting her over for special games. The last entry read, "They said I could be part of their family forever." My blood ran cold. These monsters had lured her in. I hid the diary under my mattress. Now I had proof. But what could I do with it? The police hadn't listened before. I needed more, much more. With Lily's diary hidden, I knew I had to act fast. The Millers would notice it missing soon. I decided to record their conversations, using the old voice recorder my husband left behind. I placed it near our shared fence, camouflaged among the ivy. The risk was high. If they found it, I'd be exposed. But hearing their true voices might give me leverage. That evening, they hosted a gathering. Cars I didn't recognize filled their driveway. From my bedroom window, I saw figures moving in their lit living room, shadows dancing in a circle. Chanting drifted through the night air, low and rhythmic. It wasn't English. It sounded ancient and cruel. My hands trembled as I listened. Later, I retrieved the recorder and played it back. Sarah's voice hissed, "The offering is complete. No one will trace it to us." Offering. My stomach churned. They spoke of Lily as if she were a ritual sacrifice. I had to stop them. But going to the police with this, they'd think I was a grieving lunatic. The pressure mounted. John Miller waved at me from his yard the next day, his smile tight. "Everything all right, Martha? You look pale." I forced a nod, clutching my sweater. Inside, I was screaming. That night, I reviewed the recording again and caught a new detail, a mention of the next gathering at midnight on the solstice. That was in 3 days. I had to disrupt their plans. But how? I thought of the gas line to their house, recently repaired. An idea began to form, dark and quiet. I would use their own secrets against them. The solstice was approaching, and I needed a way into the Miller's house without suspicion. I remembered Sarah mentioning their alarm system was outdated. They relied on simple locks. I needed to plant something that would expose them during their ritual, maybe trigger a power outage or record them clearly. But doing it alone felt daunting. My peace was gone. Every creak in my house made me jump. I decided to visit the local hardware store, buying a few motion sensors and a small camera, pretending I wanted to secure my own home. The clerk helped me kindly, and I felt a pang of guilt for lying. Back home, I tested the camera in my garden, its tiny lens barely visible. That afternoon, the miller's son, Mark, stopped by to return a tool I'd lent his father. He was in his 20s, always polite, but his eyes held a hollow look. "Dad said you might need help with anything," he offered. I smiled and declined, but as he left, I noticed a faint scar on his wrist, a symbol I'd seen in Lily's diary. My heart skipped. Was he part of this? Or a victim? The pressure shifted. Now I wondered if others were involved. I retreated to my kitchen, brewing tea to calm my nerves. Then I recalled the community newsletter. The Millers were hosting a neighborhood potluck next week. Perfect cover. I could sneak in then, but I had to be sure of the layout. I dug out old photos from block parties, studying their home's interior. One picture showed a basement door behind the stairs. That might be where they held their rituals. I folded the photo, my resolve hardening. Time was running out, and I couldn't afford mistakes. I spent the morning mapping the Miller's house from memory, drawing rough sketches on a notepad. The basement seemed key. I needed to see it myself. The potluck was in 2 days, and I planned to bring a dish and slip away when everyone was distracted. But first, I had to ensure they didn't suspect me. I baked cookies and took some over to Sarah, acting grateful for her support. She invited me in, and I forced myself to chat lightly, all while noting the lock on the basement door. A simple bolt, no key. "You're like family to us, Martha," she said, her voice smooth as silk. I smiled, hiding the chill that ran down my spine. Back home, I prepared the camera and sensors, practicing how to hide them in my purse. If I failed, I could lose everything, my freedom, maybe my life. But Lily's memory drove me on. That evening, I saw Mark Miller arguing with his parents in their yard, his voice sharp. "I can't do this anymore," he shouted before storming off. Was he breaking away? This changed things. He might be an ally or a new threat. I waited until dark, then checked the recorder by the fence. It had picked up nothing new. Frustration gnawed at me. As I turned to go inside, a light flickered in the Miller's basement window, and I saw shadows moving. They were preparing for something. I knew then I couldn't wait for the potluck. I had to act sooner. Tonight. Grabbing my tools, I slipped out the back door, the moon hidden behind clouds. This was it. No turning back now. I crept through the damp grass toward the Miller's basement window, my tools clutched in a sweaty hand. The bolt cutters felt heavy, a stark reminder I was breaking into my neighbour's home. I knew what I had to do: get inside and find proof of what they did to Lily. If caught, I'd be labelled a crazy old woman, maybe even arrested. The basement window was slightly ajar, just as I'd hoped from earlier observations. I pried it open, the rusted hinge groaning softly. I froze, listening for any movement from inside. Silence. I slipped through, landing on a concrete floor. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. Using a small flashlight, I scanned the room. Shelves with jars, a table covered in black cloth, and symbols painted on the walls. My heart raced. This was no ordinary basement. Then I saw it. A child's hair clip, glittery and pink, identical to Lily's. I pocketed it, my hands trembling. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from above, moving toward the stairs. I ducked behind a stack of boxes, holding my breath. The door creaked open, and John Miller's voice grumbled. "I told you to secure this place after the last one." Sarah replied, "It's handled. No one will find anything." Their words confirmed my worst fears. As they left, I noticed a loose floorboard near the table. I pried it up and found a small box containing Polaroid photos. The first one showed Lily, smiling, with the Millers standing behind her in robes. The date on the back was the day she vanished. My blood ran cold. I had to get out now. But as I turned to leave, the basement door locked from the outside with a sharp click. I was trapped. Panic surged as I realized the Millers had locked the basement door. I was trapped with their secrets, and dawn was hours away. Now I needed to escape without alerting them. If I failed, they'd find me, and I'd never see justice for Lily. I searched for another way out, running my hands along the walls. The window I came through was now out of reach without a stool. Then I remembered the old coal chute on the far wall, covered by a plywood board. I pushed it aside, revealing a narrow passage. It might lead outside, but it was tight and dark. I squeezed in, scraping my arms on the rough edges. The pressure mounted. I heard voices approaching the basement again. Sarah said, "We need to cleanse the space before the solstice." I wriggled faster, my heart pounding. Finally, I tumbled out into the backyard, landing in the bushes. I stayed low, catching my breath. Back in my house, I examined the photos more closely. In one, Mark Miller looked away, his expression pained. Was he an unwilling participant? This changed things. He might be key to exposing them, but trusting him was risky. I hid the evidence under a floorboard in my closet. The next morning, Sarah knocked on my door, her smile strained. "We noticed some disturbed soil in the yard, Martha. You haven't been poking around, have you?" I forced a laugh and denied it, but her eyes lingered too long. After she left, I checked my backyard. Footprints led from the Miller's fence to my door. They were watching me closely now. I needed a new plan, and fast. With the Millers suspicious, I decided to focus on Mark. If he was breaking away, he might help me. I aimed to reach out to him quietly, but the risk was great. If he turned on me, the Millers would make sure I never spoke again. I waited by the community mailbox, knowing he often checked it in the afternoons. When he arrived, I approached calmly. "Mark, I found something of Lily's that might interest you," I said, showing the hair clip. His face paled, and he glanced around nervously. "Not here," he whispered, handing me a folded note. I slipped it into my pocket and walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. Back home, I read the note. "Meet me at the park bench near the creek tonight at 8. Come alone." It could be a trap, but I had to risk it. The pressure was immense. The Millers might have followed him. That evening, I arrived early, hiding in the shadows. Mark appeared alone, looking shaken. "They killed her," he blurted out, his voice cracking. "It was a ritual for their group. I tried to stop it, but they threatened me." He described how Lily was lured in with promises of belonging. My hands shook as I listened. Then he handed me a USB drive. "Evidence from our meetings. But if they find out, they'll come for both of us." I took it, gratitude warring with fear. As I turned to leave, headlights swept across the park. A car I recognized as John Miller's. Mark hissed, "Go, now!" I ducked behind trees, my mind racing. They were here. How did they know? I hurried home, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I needed to look at the evidence and figure out what to do next, but waiting too long might let the Millers destroy it first. Inside, I locked the doors and drew the blinds. I plugged the drive into my old computer, my fingers fumbling. Files loaded, videos of their gatherings, chants in that same ancient language, and lists of names, including local officials. One video showed Lily being led into a circle, scared but compliant. I had to look away, tears blurring my vision. This was enough for the police. But would they believe me now? The pressure intensified. A knock came at the door. Sarah's voice called out, "Martha, we need to talk about the neighborhood watch." I quickly hid the drive and opened the door a crack. She stood there, holding a plate of cookies, but her eyes darted past me into the house. "You seem stressed," she said. "Maybe you should take a break from all this investigating." I forced a smile and thanked her, but after she left, I noticed my computer screen was on. The video paused on Lily's face. Had she seen it? I shut everything down, my heart hammering. That night, I heard noises outside, footsteps circling my house. I peeked through the blinds and saw John Miller staring back from the street. He didn't move, just watched. I backed away, trembling. They knew I had something, and they weren't going to wait. I couldn't sleep, knowing the Millers were closing in. I had to pass the evidence to someone who would believe me, but bringing others into this could endanger them. At dawn, I called the only person I trusted, my old friend Eleanor, a retired lawyer. I explained everything briefly, and she agreed to meet me at the diner in town. "Bring what you have," she said, "but be careful, Martha." I packed the USB drive, photos, and diary into a bag, feeling like a fugitive. As I left my house, John Miller's car was idling down the street. I took a different route, walking through back alleys to avoid him. The pressure was suffocating. Every stranger felt like a threat. At the diner, Eleanor listened intently as I laid out the evidence. Her face grew grim. "This is serious, but we need to go to the state police, not the local ones," she advised. "Some names on that list are officers." My hope flickered. Finally, someone believed me. But as we stepped outside, Mark Miller rushed up, breathless. "They know you met with me," he whispered. "They're planning to move the group tonight and destroy everything. You have to act now." He handed me a key to their storage unit where they kept more records. Then he vanished into the crowd. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "We'll do this together?" she said. But as I drove home, a black sedan followed me, matching my turns. I gripped the wheel tighter. They weren't just watching, they were hunting. The black sedan followed me all the way home, its headlights like unblinking eyes in my rearview mirror. I needed to lose them before I could secure the evidence from Mark, but if I led them to my house, everything would be lost. I took a sudden detour into the grocery store parking lot, weaving through the crowded aisles of cars. My hands gripped the wheel, sweat making them slippery. I parked near the entrance and hurried inside, clutching my bag with the USB drive and key. Inside, I blended with the shoppers, my heart pounding. I bought a few items to look normal, then exited through a different door, catching a bus home. It was a risky move. I left my car behind, risking it being tampered with. Back at my house, I hid the evidence in a new spot, behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Just as I finished, a knock echoed at the door. It was Sarah Miller, her face a mask of concern. "Martha, we saw your car at the store and got worried. You shouldn't be out alone," she said, her eyes scanning my living room. I forced a smile and thanked her, but after she left, I checked my car when I retrieved it later. Under the bumper, I found a small magnetic tracker. They weren't just following. They were monitoring my every move. I removed it and crushed it under my heel, but the realization chilled me. They had access to such devices, meaning their reach was wider than I thought. That night, I lay in bed, listening for any sound. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a text. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." I deleted it, but the message was clear. They knew I had the evidence, and they were escalating. I had to act faster, but how? I remembered the storage unit key Mark gave me. Tomorrow, I would visit it, but I couldn't go alone. I called Eleanor, and she agreed to come, but warned me to be cautious. As I hung up, I saw a shadow move outside my window. They were already here. At dawn, Eleanor picked me up in her sedan, and we drove to the storage facility across town. I needed to see what the Millers had hidden there, but if they caught us, it could be the end. The unit was in a secluded row, number 43B. I used the key, and the door rolled up with a creak. Inside, boxes were stacked neatly, labelled with dates and codes. We started sifting through them, finding more robes, candles, and ledgers with names and payments. One ledger detailed offerings and had Lily's name circled. My stomach turned. Then Eleanor found a box of audio recordings, cassettes from their meetings. We took a few, along with the ledger. The danger was growing. Every piece of evidence tied me deeper into this nightmare. As we loaded the items into the car, a van pulled into the lot, and John Miller stepped out. He glared at us, his face dark. "What are you doing here, Martha?" he demanded. I froze, but Eleanor stepped forward. "We're cleaning out a unit for a friend," she lied smoothly. John didn't buy it. He moved closer, his hand gripping my arm tightly. "Stay out of our business," he hissed. I pulled away, my heart racing. We drove off quickly, but the pressure was intense. Back at Eleanor's house, we listened to the tapes. One voice stood out, a local councilman participating in the chants. This went higher than I imagined. That evening, I returned home to find my front door slightly ajar. I pushed it open cautiously, and the house was ransacked. Drawers emptied, furniture overturned. They had been inside, searching for the evidence, but they didn't find it. My hiding spot held. However, on the kitchen table, they left a single photo, Lily's bear, burned and torn. A clear warning. I sank into a chair, trembling. Then my phone rang. It was Mark, whispering, "They know you have the ledger. They're planning to silence you for good." I had to move now, but where could I go? With my house violated and threats mounting, I decided to take the evidence directly to the state police with Eleanor's help. But doing so meant exposing myself, and if they had allies in law enforcement, I might be walking into a trap. We arranged to meet a detective Eleanor trusted, but I had to ensure the evidence was safe first. I moved everything to Eleanor's house, hiding it in her basement safe. I lost my peace. I couldn't stay home, So I packed a bag and left, feeling like a stranger in my own life. As I drove to Eleanor's, I noticed the same black sedan trailing me again. I took evasive routes, but it stuck close. The pressure was unbearable. Every moment felt like a countdown. At Eleanor's, we reviewed the ledger and tapes, compiling a list of names to give to the detective. But then Eleanor got a call. Her contact was suddenly unavailable, and the appointment was cancelled. She looked worried. "Someone tipped them off," she said. "We were on our own." That night, I stayed in her guest room, but sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, I heard a noise outside, a car idling. I peeked through the blinds and saw John Miller talking to a man in a suit I didn't recognize. They were pointing at the house. My blood ran cold. I woke Eleanor, and we decided to move the evidence again to a bank safety deposit box in the morning. But as we discussed it, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "They're coming for you tonight. Get out now." We grabbed the evidence and fled out the back door just as headlights swept the driveway. We hid in the garden shed, listening as footsteps approached the house. Then a voice muttered, "They're gone, but we'll find them." A sudden realization struck me. The man in the suit was the detective we were supposed to meet. He was one of them. We had no one to trust now. Huddled in the shed, Eleanor and I knew we had to disappear until we could safely deliver the evidence. We needed to reach the bank and secure it in a safety deposit box. But with the Millers and their allies hunting us, every move was dangerous. We waited until dawn, then slipped out through neighboring yards, carrying the bag of evidence. I felt every year of my age in my bones, the burden of this pursuit weighing me down. We took a bus to the next town over, where Eleanor had an account at a different bank. The pressure was intense. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see familiar faces. At the bank, we rented a box and stored the USB drive, ledger, and tapes inside. As we finished, I saw Sarah Miller enter the bank, her eyes scanning the lobby. She hadn't spotted us yet. We ducked into a restroom, my heart pounding. How did she find us here? Then I remembered. Eleanor's car was still at her house, and they might have tracked it or followed us indirectly. We waited until Sarah left, then exited cautiously. Outside, Mark was waiting by a coffee shop, gesturing for us to follow him. We hesitated, but he looked desperate. "I have something else," he whispered, leading us to a quiet alley. He handed me a flash drive. "This has video from their last ritual. It shows everything. But you need to get it to the media. The police are compromised." I took it, grateful, but wary. As we turned to leave, a van screeched to a halt nearby, and John Miller jumped out, grabbing Mark by the collar. "Traitor!" he snarled. Eleanor and I ran, losing ourselves in the crowd. But now they had Mark, and I feared what they'd do to him. We found a library and used a computer to check the flash drive. The video was clear. Lily's fate, recorded in horrific detail. I had to end this, but how? Then an email popped up on the public computer. "We have your friend. Come alone, or she's next." It was about Eleanor. They had taken her while I was distracted. The email included an address, an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town, and a demand to bring all the evidence by midnight. I intended to save Eleanor, but walking into their trap alone was suicide. If I didn't go, they might hurt her, and I couldn't live with that. I left the library, my mind racing. I had no evidence on me. It was all in the bank. But I needed a plan. I recalled the farmhouse from years ago. It had a cellar and old tunnels used for storage. Maybe I could use that to my advantage. It risked my safety, but Eleanor had risked everything for me. I went to the bank alone, retrieved the evidence, and made copies at a copy shop, mailing one set to a post office box I rented under a fake name. Then I drove to the farmhouse as instructed, the originals in my bag. The pressure was overwhelming. Every shadow seemed to move. When I arrived, John Miller stood at the door, a grim smile on his face. "Inside, Martha," he said. The house was dark, filled with the smell of dust and decay. In the main room, Eleanor was tied to a chair, gagged, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah and two other men I didn't recognize stood nearby. "Give us the evidence," John demanded. I handed over the bag, playing along. As he opened it, I triggered the distress signal on my phone, a feature Eleanor had set up earlier, alerting her lawyer friends. But John laughed. "No signal out here, old woman." Then Mark stumbled in, bruised but free. "I called the state police before they caught me," he shouted. "They're on their way." Chaos erupted. Sarah lunged at me, but I sidestepped, using my cane to trip her. The others scrambled, but headlights suddenly flooded the windows, cars pulling up outside. The police had arrived. John hissed, "This isn't over," as officers entered, arresting the Millers and their accomplices. Eleanor was freed, and we embraced, shaking. But as I looked at John being handcuffed, he met my eyes and mouthed, "We have others." The relief was short-lived. A shocking truth emerged. This was just one cell, and the network was larger. I had to ensure Lily's memory was honored, but the fight wasn't done. As we drove away, I held the copies of the evidence tight. Tomorrow, I would start again. The police took the Millers away, but John's warning echoed in my mind. We have others. I needed to ensure the copied evidence was safe and find out who else was involved. But exposing the network could put me in even greater danger. Back at Eleanor's house, we sorted through the documents, our hands shaking from adrenaline. Eleanor suggested we contact a state-level investigator she knew, but I worried about leaks. I lost my peace. I jumped at every noise, imagining unseen enemies. Later that day, a car I didn't recognize parked across the street, and a woman in a sharp suit stepped out, approaching my door. She claimed to be from social services, here to check on my well-being after the traumatic events. But her eyes were cold, and she asked too many questions about the evidence. I played confused, saying I had nothing left, but after she left, I found a tracking device similar to the previous one stuck under my mailbox. The pressure was mounting. They were using official channels to get to me. That evening, I reviewed the copied ledger and noticed a pattern. Payments to a local clinic I'd visited for my arthritis. Could they have infiltrated there too? I decided to visit the clinic tomorrow, pretending to need a checkup, but to look for clues. As I packed my bag, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice frantic. "They know about the copies. They're coming for you tonight." I peered out the window and saw shadows moving in the alley. I had to act fast, but where could I hide? Then I remembered the old community centre, now closed for renovations. It might be a temporary refuge. I grabbed the evidence and slipped out the back door, but as I reached the street, a van pulled up, its headlights blinding me. I froze, trapped. I ducked behind a hedge as the van doors slid open, revealing two men in dark clothes. I needed to reach the community centre undetected, but if they caught me, I'd lose everything. I crept along the fence line, my heart pounding in my ears. My safety was on the line. Every step felt like a gamble with my life. I made it to the centre and found an unlocked window, climbing into the dusty main hall. Inside, I hid behind stacked chairs, catching my breath. The pressure intensified when I heard voices outside. The men from the van, discussing how to secure the area. They were methodical, and I realized they had keys. I needed a better hiding spot. I recalled the storage room in the basement, where old files were kept. As I moved, I stumbled over a loose floorboard and found a hidden compartment containing more ledgers from the group, older records with names I recognized from town. This was a surprise. The community center was one of their meeting places. I took photos with my phone, adding to my evidence. But then, footsteps approached the basement door. I hid behind a cabinet as the door creaked open. A voice muttered, "She's here somewhere. Check the files." It was the woman from social services. How deep did this go? As they searched, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Look up. Now." I glanced at the high window and saw Mark's face, gesturing for me to follow him. But could I trust him? The door handle jiggled, and I had seconds to decide. I chose to trust Mark and slipped out through a back exit he indicated, meeting him in the overgrown garden. He looked pale and hurried me away from the center. "They have people everywhere, even in city offices," he whispered. I needed to get the new evidence to a secure location, but relying on Mark was risky. He might be leading me into another trap. We drove to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, where he handed me a list of names from the network, including a bank manager and a notary public. My trust was at stake. If this was a setup, I was finished. As we talked, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. John Miller's lawyer, someone I'd seen in court. The pressure was immediate. They had found us. Mark urged me to leave through the kitchen, and I did, but not before he slipped a key into my hand. "Safety deposit box at First National," he said. "Use it." I hurried out, my mind racing. At the bank, I accessed the box and added the new photos and list. But as I left, the bank manager approached me, his smile too friendly. "Everything all right, Mrs. Adams? I heard you've been through a lot." His eyes lingered on my bag. I brushed him off. But when I got home, I found my house had been entered again. This time, nothing was disturbed except a single photo on the mantel. Lily's school picture, framed, but now cracked down the middle. A silent threat. I sank into a chair, realizing they were toying with me. Then my doorbell rang, and through the peephole, I saw a delivery man with a package. I didn't order anything. I opened it cautiously, and inside was a burner phone. It rang immediately. A distorted voice said, "Stop now, or we'll take someone else you love." The line went dead. I thought of Eleanor, of Mark. Who were they targeting next? The burner phone lay on my table, a stark reminder that the network was still active. I needed to protect Eleanor and Mark, but involving them further could put them in more danger. I decided to move the evidence to a new hiding place, a storage unit I rented under a fake name in the next town. I felt isolated. I couldn't trust anyone fully now. I drove there early, the roads quiet, but I noticed a sedan following me at a distance. I took detours, losing them in a supermarket parking lot before heading to the unit. Inside, I organized the documents and digital copies, feeling a temporary relief. But the pressure returned when I returned home to find Eleanor waiting on my porch, her face anxious. "Martha, I think my phone is tapped," she said. "I've been getting strange calls." We went inside, and I told her about the burner phone and the threat. She suggested we go to the media directly, but I worried about backlash. Later, I checked my email and found a message from an address I didn't recognize. "We know about the storage unit. Leave it alone, or we'll release something about your past." What could they have? I've lived a simple life. This was a new tactic. They were digging into my history to intimidate me. I spent the evening looking through old boxes, and I found a letter from years ago, a complaint from a neighbor about my nosiness when I helped a friend in a dispute. Could they use that? It seemed trivial, but in their hands, it might be twisted. As I pondered, my landline rang. It was Mark, breathing heavily. "They took Eleanor's cat," he said. "They left it on her doorstep, not hurt, but with a note. Next time, it won't be the cat." I felt a chill. They were escalating to psychological warfare. I knew then I had to act decisively. I packed a bag with the most critical evidence and drove to the police station, intending to demand action. But as I walked in, the officer at the desk, the one who had taken my initial statement about Lily, glanced at me and then quickly looked away, his expression uneasy. Was he part of it too? I hesitated at the threshold, unsure where to turn. Standing in the police station lobby, I realized I couldn't trust anyone here. I needed to find a way to expose the network without relying on local authorities. I needed to get the evidence to a higher power, perhaps the state attorney general. But doing so meant traveling and risking interception. I left the station and drove to a quiet library in a neighboring county to use their computers for research. It cost me my time and energy. I was exhausted, and every moment felt borrowed. I found contact information for the state attorney general's office and drafted an email with attachments of the evidence. But as I was about to send it, the library computer froze. A message popped up. "Connection lost. Please see administrator." I looked up and saw the librarian watching me too closely. The pressure was everywhere. They had eyes even here. I quickly logged off and left, my heart racing. Back in my car, I checked the burner phone. It had a new message. "We know where you are. Stop while you can." I deleted it and drove to a park to think. There, I saw a woman with a stroller. Sarah Miller's sister. I recognized her from old photos. She was talking animatedly on her phone, and when she saw me, she quickly turned away. This was a turn. The network included family members I hadn't considered. I needed to document this. I took out my phone to discreetly take a picture, but as I did, a man approached me, a stranger in a suit. "Mrs. Adams, you need to come with me," he said, flashing a badge that looked official but blurred. I backed away, clutching my bag. "No, I'm fine," I said, my voice steady despite my fear. He persisted, reaching for my arm, but I swung my cane, hitting his shin. He yelped, and I ran to my car, locking the doors. As I drove off, I saw him on his phone, glaring after me. I knew then they wouldn't stop. I had to go into hiding completely. But where? Then I remembered a cabin my husband and I owned up north, unused for years. It was isolated, no internet, barely any signal. I headed there, but as I merged onto the highway, I noticed the same sedan from earlier following me. They were on my tail, and this time, I had nowhere left to run. The sedan clung to my bumper as I sped toward the cabin, its headlights glaring in my rearview mirror. I needed to lose them before they forced me off the road. But if I failed, I'd lose the evidence and possibly my life. I took a sharp turn onto an old logging road, the tires skidding on gravel. The sedan followed, closing the gap. My heart pounded as I pushed the accelerator, the forest blurring past. I remembered a fork in the road ahead that led to a dead end. I could use it to trap them or escape. The pressure was immense. Every second counted. As I approached the fork, I swerved left toward the dead end, then slammed on the brakes and cut my lights, hiding behind a thicket. The sedan sped past, missing me in the dark. I waited, breathing heavily, until their tail lights disappeared. Then I doubled back to the main route, my hands shaking on the wheel. I reached the cabin just as dawn broke, the old wooden structure looking weary but intact. I parked behind it, out of sight, and grabbed my bag with the evidence. But as I approached the door, I noticed fresh footprints in the mud. Someone had been here recently. I unlocked the door slowly, peering inside. The place was undisturbed, but on the table lay a note. "We know your hiding spots. You can't run forever." My blood ran cold. They had found this place too. I barred the door and checked the windows. But then I heard an engine in the distance. The sedan was back, and this time, they weren't alone. Barricaded in the cabin, I needed to secure the evidence and find a way to call for help. But with no phone signal, I was isolated and vulnerable. I hid the documents under a loose floorboard in the bedroom, my mind racing. I was in grave danger. If they broke in, I had no way out. Outside, car doors slammed and voices echoed, John Miller's among them. "Come out, Martha. We just want to talk," he shouted. But his tone was menacing. The pressure mounted as they started pounding on the door, the wood groaning under the force. I grabbed my late husband's old hunting rifle from the closet. Though I had no intention of using it, it was just for show. I aimed to scare them off, but if they called my bluff, I'd be in deeper trouble. Then, a sudden noise from the back window. A figure was trying to pry it open. I swung around, pointing the rifle, but it was Mark, his face pale. "Let me in. Quickly," he whispered. I hesitated, but the door was about to give way. I opened the window, and he slipped in. "I followed them here," he said. "They have a tracker on your car." We had to move fast. He helped me barricade the windows, but as we worked, the pounding stopped. Silence fell outside. I peeked through a crack in the shutter and saw them retreating to their cars. But they didn't leave. They just sat there, watching. Mark handed me a burner phone. "Use this. It's secure," he said. But when I tried to call Eleanor, the line was dead. They were jamming the signal. We were trapped, and night was falling. With the Millers and their allies surrounding the cabin, I needed to create a distraction to escape, but any move could provoke them into violence. Mark and I huddled by the fireplace, whispering plans. We were in peril. If we failed, we'd both be captured. I remembered an old trail behind the cabin that led to a ranger station a mile away. If we could reach it, we might get help. But the trail was overgrown and risky in the dark. The pressure intensified when headlights suddenly flooded the cabin again and a loudspeaker blared, "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." But the voice didn't sound official. It was John Miller's. They were impersonating authorities to lure us out. Mark shook his head. "Don't fall for it," he warned. Then a rock crashed through a window, showering glass across the floor. I grabbed the evidence bag, and we decided to make a run for it through the back. As we slipped out the rear door, a figure emerged from the trees. Sarah Miller, holding a flashlight. "Going somewhere?" she sneered, blocking our path. Mark stepped forward, his voice firm. "Let us go, Sarah. This has to end." But she laughed, and more people appeared behind her. We were surrounded. In that moment, a car horn blared from the road, and headlights swept across the yard. A different vehicle, one I didn't recognize. A woman stepped out, and to my shock, it was Eleanor, with two men in suits. "Step away from them," she commanded. The Millers hesitated, confused. Eleanor had brought help, but were they trustworthy? The men flashed badges, but in the dim light, I couldn't see clearly. John Miller spat on the ground and signaled his group to retreat. As they pulled away, Eleanor rushed to us. "I tracked your phone," she said. "But we need to leave now. They'll be back." I felt a glimmer of hope, but as we got into her car, I noticed one of the men watching me too closely, his expression unreadable. Had we just traded one threat for another? In Eleanor's car, speeding away from the cabin, I needed to ensure the evidence was safe and decide who to trust. But the presence of the strangers made me uneasy. Eleanor explained that the men were private investigators she hired after the police failed us. My paranoia was overwhelming. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in danger. We drove to a motel in the next town, where we rented 2 rooms. Inside, I checked the evidence. It was all there, but the stress was taking its toll. My hands trembled as I laid out the documents. The pressure returned when one of the investigators, a man named Carl, asked too many questions about the ledger. "We need to verify this before proceeding," he said, his eyes lingering on the names. I insisted on keeping it with me, but Eleanor urged me to trust them. Later, I overheard Carl on his phone in the hallway saying, "Yes, we have it. The old woman is cooperative." My heart sank. Was he betraying us? I confronted Eleanor, and she seemed genuinely surprised, but we decided to play along until we could confirm their loyalty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out to the parking lot to check the car for trackers and found one under the bumper, just like before. I removed it, but then I saw Carl talking to someone in a dark car across the street. When he spotted me, he hurried over. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "I was arranging a meet with a contact from the state attorney's office." But his nervousness told me otherwise. I went back to my room and packed my bag, ready to flee. Just then, my burner phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Don't trust the investigators. They're part of the network." I showed it to Eleanor, and her face fell. We were on our own again, with nowhere safe to go. With the investigators compromised, Eleanor and I needed to get the evidence to the State Attorney General ourselves, but doing so meant traveling to the capital, a journey full of risks. We left the motel before dawn, taking Eleanor's car and avoiding main roads. Our resources were running low. We were both exhausted and almost out of cash. I drove while Eleanor navigated, her hands shaking as she held the map. The pressure was constant. Every police car we passed made me flinch, wondering if they were part of the network. We stopped at a small diner for coffee, and I used the payphone to call the Attorney General's office, but the line was busy. As we sat in a booth, a news report on the TV caught my attention. It mentioned a crackdown on a local cult, with arrests made, but no names given. Was this about the Millers? A spark of hope ignited, but then the reporter said the group was wider than initially thought, and investigations were ongoing. We paid and hurried back to the car, but as we pulled out, a black SUV pulled in behind us, matching our speed. Eleanor gripped my arm. "They found us," she whispered. I took a series of turns, but the SUV stayed close. We were on a lonely country road with no help in sight. Then, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice urgent. "I have a friend in the state police. He's waiting for you at the next rest stop. Look for a blue truck." I didn't know if I could believe him, but we had no choice. I sped toward the rest stop, and sure enough, a blue truck was parked there, a man in uniform standing beside it. As we approached, he waved us over. But just as we stopped, the SUV screeched to a halt behind us, and John Miller jumped out, a gun in his hand. The officer drew his weapon, shouting for John to stand down. In the chaos, I grabbed the evidence bag and ran toward the woods, Eleanor close behind. Gunshots rang out, and I didn't look back. Gunshots echoed behind us as Eleanor and I dashed into the thick woods, the evidence bag clutched tight against my chest. I needed to find shelter and protect this proof, but if we slowed down, they would catch us. Branches scraped my arms, and my breath came in ragged gasps. Eleanor stumbled, and I grabbed her hand, pulling her along. We pushed deeper into the forest, the sounds of shouting fading slightly. My heart pounded. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. We found a small hollow under a fallen tree and crouched there, listening. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps approaching. Light, cautious. A voice whispered, "Martha, it's Mark." I hesitated, but Eleanor nodded, so I risked a peek. Mark stood alone, his face pale. "The officer is down, but he called for backup before John got away," he said. My relief was short-lived. We were still in danger. Mark led us to an old hunter's cabin he knew, hidden deeper in the woods. Inside, it was dusty, but secure. I checked the evidence. Everything was intact, but as we caught our breath, Mark's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his face tightened. "They know we're here. They're coming from the east." "How?" Then I noticed a fresh cut on Mark's jacket, a small tracking device, similar to the ones before. He hadn't known. We had to move again, but where? The sky was darkening, and rain began to fall. We decided to head for the nearest town on foot, but as we stepped outside, a flashlight beam swept across the trees. They had found us already. We retreated into the cabin, barring the door as voices closed in outside. I needed to disable the tracker and find a new escape route, but our options were shrinking fast. Eleanor helped me search the cabin for tools while Mark kept watch. I found an old knife and carefully cut the tracker from Mark's jacket, then crushed it under my heel. The pressure mounted as fists pounded on the door, and John Miller's voice snarled, "Open up! We know you're in there!" My hands shook, but I focused on the evidence. I couldn't let them take it. Suddenly, a window at the back shattered, and a canister rolled in, emitting thick smoke. Tear gas? We coughed and stumbled toward the front door, but it was blocked. Then an engine roared nearby, and headlights flashed through the smoke. A voice shouted, "State police! Everyone down!" Confusion erupted as figures in uniforms swarmed the area. Eleanor and I dropped to the floor, covering our faces. When the smoke cleared, officers had the Millers and their accomplices in handcuffs. A detective helped us up, introducing himself as Agent Harris from the State Task Force. "We received your evidence copies," he said. "We've been monitoring this group for months." I felt a wave of relief, but it faded when I saw Sarah Miller smiling coldly from the police car. She mouthed, "This isn't over." Agent Harris assured us we were safe, but as we were led to a squad car, I noticed one officer avoiding my gaze, the same one from the local station who had seemed uneasy before. Were there still moles in the system? We drove away, but the doubt lingered. At the state police station, Agent Harris debriefed us in a secure room. I needed to ensure the evidence was processed correctly and that Lily's case would be reopened. But trusting them fully was hard after all the betrayals. Eleanor sat beside me, her hand steady on mine. We handed over the originals, and Harris promised a thorough investigation. Reliving Lily's story was painful. It brought fresh tears. Later, Mark joined us, having given his statement. He looked exhausted, but determined. "They've arrested several key members, including the bank manager and the notary," Harris said. "But the network is extensive." The pressure eased slightly, but I couldn't shake the fear that someone might interfere. That evening, we were placed in a safe house, a small apartment with barred windows. As I settled in, my phone rang. It was Eleanor's lawyer friend, confirming that the Attorney General had taken personal interest. But then, a news report on TV showed the Millers being led into court, and John Miller glanced directly at the camera, a faint smirk on his face. What did he know? Later, Harris called with an update. We found more records at the community centre linking them to other disappearances. My heart ached for other families, but also for Lily. As I hung up, I looked at a photo of her on my phone, her bright smile. I made a silent promise to see this through, no matter what. But that night, I woke to a noise outside the safe house. Peeking through the blinds, I saw a dark car idling across the street. They were still watching. Over the next few days, the investigation progressed, but the threats didn't stop. I needed to testify in court and ensure the Millers faced justice, but doing so meant putting myself in the public eye, where their allies could reach me. Agent Harris assigned a guard for our protection, but I felt like a prisoner in the safe house. Eleanor decided to return home, promising to stay in touch, but I worried for her safety. The pressure was psychological now. Anonymous calls and letters arrived, warning me to drop the case. One letter contained a dried flower, Lily's favourite, from my garden. How did they get it? My peace was shattered, but I held on to the evidence copies I had mailed earlier. Then, Mark visited with news. Sarah Miller is trying to cut a deal by naming higher-ups, but she's demanding immunity. Anger boiled inside me. She might escape full punishment. I met with the prosecutor, urging them to refuse any leniency. As I left the meeting, a woman approached me, a reporter from a major newspaper. "I want to tell your story," she said. "It could protect you and expose the rest." I hesitated, but agreed, thinking of Lily. The interview was set for the next day. That night, I dreamed of Lily laughing in the garden, and I woke with a start. The guard outside was gone, replaced by a new face I didn't recognize. When I asked, he said he was from a different shift, but his badge looked off. I locked myself in the bathroom, calling Harris. He didn't answer. Then, a knock came at the door. "Martha, it's me, Mark," a voice said, but it sounded strained. I didn't respond, and the knocking grew louder. The knocking stopped after I stayed silent, and soon Agent Harris called back, apologizing for the missed call. The guard had been reassigned legitimately. The relief was faint, like a distant echo. Over the following weeks, the trial began, and I testified, my voice steady as I described Lily's disappearance and the Millers' actions. The evidence was overwhelming. John and Sarah Miller were convicted on multiple charges, along with several accomplices. The network was dismantled, though some smaller players remained at large. After the verdict, I returned home, the house feeling emptier than ever. I spent days sorting through Lily's things, finally able to mourn without fear. I donated most of her toys, but kept her bear and diary, placing them in a memory box. Eleanor and I started a support group for families affected by similar groups, finding purpose in the pain. One afternoon, I sat in the garden, planting lilies, her favourite flowers. The sun was warm, and the birds sang softly. I thought of Lily's smile, and how she loved this garden. It wasn't a loud victory, but a quiet one. I knew she was at peace, and so was I. The world moved on, but I kept her memory alive in small daily acts. I smiled, feeling the weight lift slowly, and knew I had done right by her.